I both came down to Pensacola for the Kent Hovind retrial because the first trial resulted in a hung jury.
Right.
What's happened over the last 3 days?
Well, first we had the hearing with the judge, and she decided that she was going to issue a couple of orders, one dismissing the case as the prosecution asked, so the 3 charges they were going to do the retrial on, those were dismissed without prejudice. What that means is the government can try those again if they so choose. The other more surprising thing to me was the judge accepted Hovind's attorney Thomas Keith's arguments regarding acquitting Kent because the evidence simply wasn't there. It was a Rule 29 motion. And she accepted those. So the next day, yesterday, she issued an order acquitting Kent. Kent's followers have been going absolutely berserk. They are so thrilled. They see the hand of God in this. They are now agitating to get Kent free now. They are calling the federal marshal, calling the Bureau of Prisons, calling anybody they think that might get Kent out while he's still in the area.
Is that going to happen?
I don't think so. The reason is because Kent is still considered a custodial in the custody of the Bureau of Prisons, even though he's in the Santa Rosa County Jail right now. He has until August 10th to serve. Now, I know some of Hovind's followers, they call themselves Hovindicators, have been saying, well, he should have been out in February on house arrest. Well, that wasn't even clear before he was sent down here to Pensacola for the trial that he would have gotten out on the February house arrest. It's for sure that he would be getting out on what they call, it's like supervised probation on August 10th or thereabouts. But
what's supervised probation mean, and how long might it last?
Well, for him, we know it's going to last 3 years. That's what the judge ordered back in 2007 when she sentenced him. The probation office will set certain requirements. I'm not entirely familiar with what those are. I know that there's some fees that he's going to have to pay when he's out. He's got to pay a certain amount of money a month. But beyond that, I'm not sure what the requirements are going to be.
Will he be free to travel and preach?
Probably not. And that's strictly a security thing. I think more than anything else, they don't want him wandering around the country where they can't keep track of him. Because remember, he is on probation.
Wow. And the Free Kent Hovind movement, the news has been good for them.
Oh, very good.
So are they celebratory and merciful, or if anything, has this whipped up the antagonism?
I would say it's the latter. They have definitely gotten some serious antagonism. They're really feeling their oats. They are as antagonistic or even more towards the judge, towards the prosecution, towards the government in general. As I mentioned, they've been banging down the doors. They were calling the U.S. Marshal's office trying to get Kent released. It's like, well, no, that's not who holds Kent. That's the Bureau of Prisons. So then they switched over to the Bureau of Prisons, and they've been calling everybody, calling Dallas, calling Washington, anybody and everybody that they can possibly think of to listen to them, to their pleas of getting Kent out as soon as possible.
Okay, well, they're trying to get their man out, but in terms of how they feel about who they perceive to be their opposition, the press, the bloggers who've been covering this trial who are not part of the Free Kent Hovind movement, is there an olive branch or the opposite?
Not hardly. It's not hardly at all. They still think pretty antagonistic thoughts towards those of us who don't share their opinions.
And why do you think that's so? Why is this such a personalized campaign? And I ask you to bring back your experience with Scientology and stuff as well.
In some ways I'm kind of mystified because I would have thought that they would have dropped this in the sense that, and been happily praising the Lord and totally dropped the idea that that they had enemies and all that. But if anything, it seems like to have emboldened them in calling out people they felt were wrong. And
Put your legal hat on for a second.
okay.
Is this a big deal? Does this happen every day that federal prosecutors will invest this much in a case? And I mean, is this a rare occurrence or an everyday occurrence, as far as you know?
It's rarer than you think. The federal government doesn't like to bring cases unless they're sure they can win. To get to this point, to get up to practically the day of trial and to ask for the charges to be dismissed is really unusual.
And it's not like the hung jury. I mean, we understand the hung jury was 11-1, with 11 wanting to find Hovind guilty on all charges.
Right.
So I imagine that the federal government thought they would retry this case and that they would win.
And I think they did too. I think they were kind of taken aback by the fact that they got this out of the blue, last minute, what Prosecutor Eggers called untimely motion to dismiss, and with the arguments in there that they had. She only wanted a week. By rights, she could have had 2 weeks to look this over, but she only wanted a week, and the judge wasn't having any of it. She wanted to go to trial.
Why?
Why did the judge want to go to trial? There could be a lot of things. I'm not familiar with her court calendar. It may be that she had a book calendar, and if she had to move back 1 week, she would have an empty week with nothing going on, and it would totally mess up her calendar, maybe even into next year.
Okay, so there could be budgetary, timing factors, scheduling issues. Any sense?
All of those.
Any sense that there was? I mean, my impression from watching the two of them in a courtroom for a couple of weeks is that they had a lot of communication. The Free Kent Hovind movement looked at the prosecution and the judge as being
Jezebels.
well, and in coordination. Were you surprised that this? I'm not saying it's animus, but it was. They were dancing to different music, no, or.
I think they had competing interests. The judge was thinking of her calendar in her courts, and probably the prosecutor was thinking of her calendar. It had to have thrown a monkey wrench into everything that the prosecutor was doing. It's not like she's waiting around for things. She's got trials booked up. She's got to move forward too. Pushing everything back a week had to have messed things up for her as well.
Was the arguments presented by whoever they were presented by? I mean, they were presented by Thomas Keith, the defense lawyer for Hovind. But what were the points raised? Do you feel they were legitimate? And do you think they came from the defense attorney? Do you think they came from outside attorneys? Do you think they came from the United States Justice Foundation? What's going on here?
When I read the motion, I don't recall being terribly impressed by it. And from being in the court and listening to the judge, she wasn't awfully impressed by it. In fact, she was very clear. In fact, she stated, I want this on the record that I would have declined this. I would not have accepted this motion to dismiss. And I thought that was an interesting thing. She was pretty, I would describe it as militant almost about the fact that she just hated this motion. And I don't know if it was because it was untimely, she didn't say anything about that, or if it was just the way the thing was argued. What I had heard through the grapevine about this particular motion was that they had used strictly 11th Circuit cases, because this court is in the 11th Circuit, and any appeal would have been heard by the 11th Circuit. I believe they're in Atlanta. And that was deliberate. But the judge wasn't buying it. She specifically mentioned the Pendergrass case. She was not impressed with that citation.
What does this mean if anything, in terms of civil liberties, in terms of precedents in dealing with sovereign citizen or tax evasion cases? Do you think this is going to have any impact at all on the collective body of law? And what does this mean in terms of the momentum of more extremist, more conspiracy theory-oriented activists in this country?
I don't know that it's going to mean anything at all. It's weird because Kent Hovind has a fan club. They call themselves the Ho Vindicators, the people seeking vindication for Kent Hovind. But I haven't seen that bleed over into, say, the larger sovereign citizen or even the conspiracy movement, even though some of the people who are supporting Kent Hovind, like Pastor James David Manning out of Harlem, New York, he's always careful to mention Kent in hosts with a bunch of other conspiracies like Jade Helm. I was listening to him talk the other day after the verdict came down, and he very specifically mentioned Jade Helm. He mentioned a couple of other conspiracy theories. But I think he's unusual in that respect. I think for the average Ho Vindicator, the average follower, they don't see it in terms of a larger conspiracy theory, or they're not, let me rephrase that, they're not linking themselves up to a larger conspiracy theory.
What about issues of 501c3 status for churches, exemptions for pastors? Again, is there some precedence being set here?
No, I don't think so. If the precedent was set, it was set back with the 2006 trial, which was basically that, you can't call your people missionaries and yet treat them like employees, and that's what Kent was doing. He had set work times. They had vacation days. He was not treating them like missionaries. But this trial, no, not at all.
Are you happy or sad that Kent Hovind is about to be free?
I think prison is a terrible place. I'm happy that he's getting out of a terrible place. There's no doubt in my mind that I would prefer people not be in prison. The problem with Kent Hovind getting out of prison is I think he is absolutely and completely unrepentant about what he's done. He continues to claim that he paid all the taxes that he was supposed to. We know that's not true. This is a guy who sat there and told the New York Times that he had not filed a 1040 in 30 years, and that was in 2003. As far as we know, he never filed a 1040 for the 3 years that he was out after that. He didn't pay income and Social Security taxes on his employees. That's why one of the reasons why he went to prison the first time. My concern when Kent Hovind getting out is I wonder how long he's going to be out before he runs into trouble. Is it going to be that if he doesn't file a tax return for the last last 4 months of 2015, if he doesn't file on April 15, 2016, is he going to be in trouble again? I could see that as being one of his probation requirements, is that he has to get a regular job with regular tax withholding and file tax returns. And if he doesn't do that, he's going to be back in prison.
Do you think that he'll go to work with his son and the two of them will build the ministry?
No, I don't think so. And I think it may be a requirement of his probation that he goes out and gets a regular job not working with the family. I base that on what happened with Kent's wife, Jo. After she served her sentence, I guess it was about 2009-ish, she got out. She wanted to go work with Eric. I mean, that makes sense. And Eric was making the ministry legitimate. He'd gone to get a 501c3. He was doing all the stuff he was supposed to be doing. But the probation office didn't buy it, and she ended up working at a coffee shop.
Which coffee shop?
The Drowsy Poet.
Have you any opinion on the investment, the startup capital for the Drowsy Poet? I guess there's rumors that some of it was Kent's money.
Oh, I've heard that rumor. I don't know. I think it's a funny rumor. I don't put a whole lot of stock in it.
How's the coffee and pastry?
Oh, it's fabulous. I went there today and I had one of their Miltons and an apple crumb coffee cake, and it was just delicious.
What else would you like to tell us about the twists and turns that this trial has taken, and the Hove indicators? And also, you listened to an interview we did with one of the jurors. Were there any surprises there, or things that you started to think about?
Well, with regard to the Hove indicators, I think when Kent gets out, he really needs to sit down with Rudy Davis and thank that guy from the bottom of his heart. Because Rudy Davis, more than any one person, has really pushed this movement along. He's worked with people. He's gotten disparate sides to talk to each other. I listened to calls where he would tell people, we really have to work with each other. Let's not get involved in doctrinal disputes. All we're here to do is to get Kent Hovind out of jail. And, so Kent owes Rudy Davis a whole lot. And I sincerely hope that once Kent is out of jail, that he and Rudy will have a really good get-together.
Was it the Hove indicators that got Kent out of jail?
I think they may have gotten him some legal assistance that may have helped him, but really, they would say that it was God. I would say it was probably more Thomas Keith than anything else.
Any further observations?
You mentioned that juror that we talked to, or you talked to earlier, and he was an interesting guy. I think he was really sympathetic to Kent in many ways. I think that he probably was more favorable to Kent than probably most of the other jurors. He's a Baptist. He is an ex-military guy. He very conservative. I think that they had a lot in common, and I believe that he probably did more to sway the jury than anything else. But I have to also say, I asked him after the interview if he, about the judge overturning their guilty verdict, and he said he was surprised. So there you go.
Okay, well, we'll stay tuned.
We will.
Thank you very much.